Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast, the podcast where we discuss matters of national, international and local importance in a calm, measured and reasonable way to get to the heart of the matter. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sainsbury. Good evening.
And good evening indeed. And there you've been tapping away like a Jean-Michel Jarre on speed, trying to get the podcast up and running, and we're just a couple of minutes late, but it looks like everything is working now. So local this week, Simon, and Tuesday night was or Tuesday afternoon was full local council, first one we've had for a couple of months.
Yeah, it was indeed. It was a bit of a packed schedule with quite a few things on the agenda, which we'll go through. It was the first full council meeting since there've been a slew of defections to reform from Portsmouth Independence Party, and also since the latest one this week from the Liberal Democrats, which I'm sure we'll probably touch on.
But that hadn't happened, had it, on Tuesday?
No, it hadn't. So that was the interesting thing, as we'll probably comment on later on, is that Jason Fazackley, I'm probably being a bit disingenuous to say that he woke up Wednesday morning and decided to move to reform, but he was happily voting with the Lib Dems on Tuesday. People watching the stream will see, and actually in some of the clips, he's actually in the background in some of the clips that we've got. So you can try to read into his facial expressions if you want, whether those were shall I, shan't I expressions or not. But essentially, a pretty kind of packed agenda with a slew of things. A lot of them, I know we've spoken before about about whether or not things that are not actually things that the council can actually do itself, and what purpose they serve being on the council paper. There are differing views about that, and about whether that's actually actually kind of useful for the council to kind of make its views heard and known there. But you'll hear from the clips that there's a bit of a theme to some of the I don't know, it's almost like point scoring. It's almost like some of them writing leaflets. I don't know. We shall see.
It's a fundamental question, isn't it, Simon? Which is that when Halloween is done, then obviously the shops start pouring into Christmas mode, and I guess it's something we haven't debated. Is it too early for leaflet writing season yet? Because obviously there allegedly will be elections. So again, you've got to you've got to get those motions in to say, we went to full council and invited the council to back a motion to the Labour government to stop it raining, and they voted against it. Your local Lib Dem council wants it to rain on your head. So we'll see just whether any of the motions are in the grandstanding campaign. So what do we got first up, Simon?
So I'll just kind of briefly mention there were only two deputations from a member of the public this time, but they were both actually from the same person, both about item 11D, which is the digital ID, and 11F about the fair and transparent dispersal of asylum seekers in accommodation in Portsmouth, and both from Chelsea Scott. So I won't play clips of their contributions, but they are kind of mentioned in passing from some of the other ones. So the first one that we've got back down our way down the agenda at 11A, the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. This is a motion brought by Councillor Cllr Gardner from the Conservatives and Councillor Russell Simpson, now of Reform fame, to basically call out the concerns about the government's plan to amend planning regulations, essentially, and how those work. So let's play the clip on that one.
Let's have a
Members, this motion concerns the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, a matter of profound importance to our city, community and our democratic accountability. Angela Rayner's bill has the Secretary of State sweeping powers to strip planning committees of their role and force decisions onto officers alone, potentially. These proposals risk silencing elected councillors on the very developments that shape our wards. As members, we will be united in believing our city's planning decisions, the decisions that shape the neighbourhoods where our residents live, work and raise their families, must be taken as locally and transparently as possible. The proposals in this bill risk shifting power away from local councillors and communities to the centre, diminishing our ability to represent and protect the interests of those we serve. We all support an efficient, well-managed planning system that delivers the homes, infrastructure and services that our city needs. But efficiency must not come at the expense of accountability, community voices and local oversight. The government suggests that planning committees are too often refusing beneficial housing development with insufficient planning justification, leading to an unacceptable increase in costs and delays to schemes. However, national evidence shows different. Most planning applications are decided by local authority planning officers operating under delegated authority from the council in around 96% of applications in 23-24. Most applications are approved. 80% of all applications were approved in 23-24. Just 2.7% of major cases and 1% of minor cases refused by local authorities were later overturned by the planning inspector at appeal. The Local Government Association warns this bill risks eroding public trust by gagging the people's elected representatives. Councillors are often the last line of defence for residents. When a developer wants to cram yet another HMO into a quiet street, who speaks for the families already there? We do. When a developer wants to squeeze an inappropriate property onto the back garden as backland development, who opposes? We do. Take that away and you don't streamline planning, you kill democracy for local people.
Another ill-thought-through initiative by the government, and to me it seems part of a wider attack on local government. It's a further centralisation of power when actually the change we need is to devolve power, money and responsibility to local areas who best understand what they need and have the responsibility for those decisions made by local councillors. This isn't about being a NIMBY, it's about making the power to make decisions locally here in Portsmouth and not in Westminster. And that's the reason why I'm going to be supporting this motion.
We are going to abstain from voting on this motion because it's a motion that only tells part of the story. I share, in fact, personally, some of the concerns that have been expressed about allowing councillors to represent public opinion. But one of the key things about the Planning and Infrastructure Bill is that it's leading us towards a much more clearly plan-based system. The local plan has been the subject of all sorts of consultation with the public. And since I trained as a planner in the 1970s, I have always advocated a plan-based system. In other words, a system where the public can participate in drawing up a plan for the city. And we've done that on several occasions, and the latest version is what the paper we approved earlier is amending. And really, because that is not mentioned at all, the notion that we, the citizens, should get involved in the development of a local plan, which would then signal to developers what we expect to be able to give permission for, and we would already have discussed those land use proposals and the policies that guide development, including HMOs, is already then decided by a much wider group than just the council members itself. And because this motion doesn't mention any of that, it isn't these decisions we all make isn't part of isn't done in a vacuum. It should be done in a place where we've all discussed much more widely than this chamber what the local plan looks like, what the policies are, and what are the principles we agree on. And that is the framework in which decisions can be and should be delegated to officers. So we'll be abstaining on this motion because it's not really a motion that's complete enough for us to put our name to. But I mean, we do understand the need for citizen involvement.
Councillor Mason and Councillor Gardner put it quite eloquently exactly what this motion is about. I mean, if you feel it isn't adequate enough, you put an amendment in. That's what I always thought. You don't just abstain from it. And I'm a bit disappointed because I was hoping that everyone would support this, and I was going to actually ask the Labour councillors to actually get on the back of the Secretary of State to give us an answer back from July, when we put a motion in lawful development certificates, which was amended by Councillor Mason, and that actually had a mentioning of the Modernising Planning Committee, and we've heard nothing. You know, at the end of the day, we've been elected to represent the concerns of residents, and for you not to support, and for Labour not to support it, it's just a real cop-out. And I really feel for their residents that they don't feel that the councillors they are elected are going to represent them when there's planning disputes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this, and I also swore I'd never say that, but here we are. I wholeheartedly support this motion, and I'm glad it's come before us today. I do take umbrage with the notion that this is somehow honourable when the MP for Portsmouth North refuses to talk to residents about this move by central government and won't even acknowledge her role on the committee that's actually putting it in place.
The government are forcing deeply unpopular local government reorganisation on the people of Portsmouth with the creation of a mega council. It is incredulous at the same time they are taking steps to give them powers to stop decisions being made locally by the people they affect. Let's not hand away the safeguard of local voices in the name of speed or centralisation.
So there we are.
Quite an array of councillors speaking there.
Yeah, so we had Councillor Gardner, Councillor Candlish, Smythe, Simpson, Swann, and then closed out again by Councillor Gardner. So yeah, there's quite a few kind of views there, some concerns about kind of what it was, what actually the Infrastructure and Planning Act is kind of seeking to do, and how much power it's taking out of the hands of councillors to comment on or call in planning applications, and just putting into the hands of officers. I guess Councillor Smythe's kind of argument is applicants and developers will know kind of what to expect, because that's not then, I guess you could argue, to the whim of political decision. It's more a case of, well, it follows a process and it either passes regulation or it doesn't.
Well, and I guess this is where we get into this very grey area, don't we, around planning, and it is very emotional. And you know, HMOs is probably the most contentious, isn't it, in terms of, you know, but there are some fairly clear rules and guidance around HMOs in terms of X% within a radius, and there can be 2 next to each other but not 3, and there can't be one, you know, a property sandwiched between 2. So there are some fairly what seem to me to be very logical and straightforward rules. So I'm always kind of a little bit perplexed, perhaps at times, when things come to the planning committee, and we've touched on it on the podcast before, which is, you know, a lot of the developers kind of seem to know the rules better than the politicians, and the politicians can make strenuous arm-waving deputations on behalf of their residents. But often the developer just sits there and sort of smiles smugly and does you make as much noise as you like. You know, if you reject it now, I'm simply going to appeal, and whilst I'm appealing, I'll ask for you to pay all of my costs, and I'll win.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was an example at one of the planning meetings, I think a couple of months ago, where the officers actually presented a bit of a stats review over the previous 18 months. And of the applications that had been turned down at planning committee against the advice of the officers, so the officers were saying, actually under the regulations you should pass this, but it had been called in or then come to the planning committee. 90% of those of the refusals were overturned.
Yeah, and
so yeah.
And I think there were some other really valid points made in there that you know, the whole local government reorganisation and devolution was about pushing power down to local people to make local decisions. So you know, whilst you've got to have a framework and rules, it does feel a little bit counterintuitive that, you know, that there is almost a move to centralise more of this. And I think Councillor Smythe, on behalf of Labour, has taken a little bit of a tiptoeing fine line there, which is that, well, we'll abstain on it because we sort of support it, but it kind of criticises our team. So we're almost going to hope it's not happening. Am I being unfair?
I don't know. Well, obviously we can't speak to the motivation. We're going to have to speculate about that. But obviously, what the action of what they did. So how this one kind of turned up when it went to the school board was that essentially the motion passed. with 25 votes for and 8 abstentions. So the abstentions, including the Lord Mayor, generally doesn't vote unless there's a tie. So the Lord Mayor and the Labour group abstained. There were no votes against, and essentially everybody else, the Reform, Lib Dems, and the Conservatives voted for it.
Interesting numbers there, though. Only 33 people in the House out of 42.
Yeah, there were some absence notices of absence at the beginning of the meeting. Some people with care obligations, some people still at work, some people on their way and would be turning up late. So it was kind of like a bit of a mixture there.
So that one has whistled through. What came next?
Yep. So what came next was fair votes, which was the Lib Dem proposal from Councillors Hunt and Adair, essentially calling on the council to express its support for voting at 16, which the government have already said is a policy that they had in their manifesto, and closing loopholes that allow foreign donors and shell companies to influence UK political parties, and essentially getting rid of first past the post to replace it with some form of PR that isn't entirely specified. So, and calling on basically the council leader to write to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and local government. So a Lib Dem motion calling on the Lib Dem leader of the Lib Dem run council to write to the Secretary of State. But let's listen to the.
Yes.
Go on.
Well, just before we dive in, I mean, as part of local government reorganisation and devolution, do we know whether the future voting structure for the whole of the UK has been delegated out to Portsmouth City Council?
I'm not aware of that element. No.
Right.
I see what you're asking.
So we're.
But I mean, they're not.
We're calling on ourselves to write to somebody else to make some changes that they're going to make anyway, and some other changes that they're not going to make, but we'd really like them to. I'm going to settle back now and listen to the clip.
Okay, not at all as if you're not approaching this with an open ear.
Yeah.
Right, let's play the clip.
And today, I believe that young people are even better informed than back then, and have a right to make choices about their futures, including by voting. Today, over this Remembrance Week, we saw young people outside doing their duty as members of the UK's military setup, but they are not allowed to vote. Throughout the year, we see the services given by young people in so many voluntary ways and parts of group or as carers. But they too are not allowed to vote, not in England and Wales. Sorry, not in England. And already 16 and 17-year-olds are trusted to vote in Scotland and Wales for Scottish and Welsh parliaments and for local councillors. And why is that right denied to English youngsters? We need to move away from the first past the post to proportional representation. Their votes will want to weigh the same wherever they live. A vote for a Green will help elect a Green person. A vote for Reform will help to elect a Reform person. Same for the Lib Dems, Labour, Conservatives and Independents too. And for fairer votes means getting corruption out of politics.
Yeah, this is a motion where half I love and half I hate. I absolutely love the idea of proportional representation. Fully support it in every capacity, and I think it should be implemented immediately. And I find it so ironic that a lot of parties campaign on it, and then when they actually become the government, they all of a sudden don't want it anymore. I always believe that if you should be able to vote in an election, you should be able to stand in an election. So I think if the motion maybe read something, and maybe the government was suggesting allowing 16-year-olds to stand, then that would be a different conversation. But I find it very hypocritical that we allow 16-year-olds to vote in an election that they can't stand in, and that's a fundamental issue. We're not comfortable supporting a motion that would support in any way 16 or 17-year-olds vote, and we think it's inappropriate.
If we'd been in this chamber 100 years ago, it is very likely that a notice of motion may come forward to give votes to women. 100 years ago, that was seen as something absolutely outrageous. You know, what are you talking about? Women voting? I think they're more than capable of making reasoned decisions on what they're going to vote for.
I'm curious about the reform amendment, because why didn't they actually suggest that welcoming the idea of 16-year-olds being able to stand for office? It seems really weird to just knock it out. But I'm presuming it's in line with Councillor Madgwick's view that young people shouldn't be paid as much as they currently are, and they shouldn't be allowed to vote either. So I have long been convinced that, partly because of the practical reasons that we've talked about here, about the ability to work and so on, that 16 to 17-year-olds should be able to cast. Having a massive majority when you can only secure 40% of the vote didn't seem to me to be right. But let's not forget that the first past the post system doesn't guarantee majority governments either. The coalition from 210 to 215, the 1970s, when the Labour government relied on the Liberals for support, you go back to the mid-1920s, and you can go back to after the First World War, to the second 1910 election. The Liberals relied on other parties to support them. So first past the post doesn't guarantee strong and stable government, as is often claimed.
Well, in different things, you become adults at different ages. So if you're in the criminal justice system, 16-year-olds can be tried as adults. Criminal responsibility starts at 12. You can be tried, if they decide the offence is appropriate, you can be tried as an adult when you are actually younger than 16, but you can be tried as an adult at 16.
People who do not live or properly contribute to taxes in our country should not be allowed to vote here, but nor should they also be able to give big sums of money to buy influence here, whether they vote or not.
I'd like to give Councillor Cordy the chance to tell us what the amendment actually means. It would help the Chamber when they're considering whether to vote for or not the amendment, if you told us what on earth the amendment was about.
It was the 1983 general election that triggered for me a lifelong interest not in proportional representation but in electoral reform delivered by the single transferable vote in multi-member constituencies, because it is the only decent form of proportional representation. That general election returned 23 seats for the SDP Liberal Alliance with 25.4% of the vote. The Labour Party, in their worst electoral performance until the more recent one on the second Jeremy Corbyn election, secured 209 seats on 27.6% of the vote. 2.2% of the vote difference made a difference in seats of 186. That is not, and it never has been, an electoral system fit for purpose in the 21st century in a modern democracy. It seems that locally at least, the policy of the Reform Party is that young people should get their minimum wage cut and they shouldn't be allowed to vote in elections. I hope they all remember that when the time comes that they do.
I just wanted to come from this from a different perspective, really, as a parent of a child who's almost about to be 15 in a couple of months' time. He is politically interested in these things. My fantastic but wonderfully weird child can often be found with the reports I get, having a look through at the public reports, because he's interested. In fact, he's so interested that he puts a number of people to shame, because he reads through those reports and he will ask me what the outcome of those reports are.
39B. Whilst I was out of the room, I believe Councillor Steve Pitt said that I advocated to cut the wages of young people. I just want to clarify that I never said I wanted to cut the wages of young people. In the last minimum wage increase, I think it was an 18% increase versus a 6% for older people. So what I said on that interview was I want to frozen, not cut, and that is a difference. Thank you.
They chided Councillor Smythe for not amending their proposition earlier on. They could have made the proposition about all the others, and because Councillor Madgwick said that he wanted to see that the reason for opposing it is they want to see 16, 17-year-olds be able to stand in elections. Well, we would have voted for that. So why didn't you amend it? I am going to be very interested in seeing what our Conservative colleagues do.
So,
another
some interesting thing. So for this one, there was an amendment from Reform. However, that amendment essentially sought to remove the part of the motion that was essentially removing the sentence that asked the leader to write to the Secretary of State in relation to welcoming 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. and Judith Smythe was essentially kind of pointing out, well, actually, if you do that to the motion, the rest of it doesn't actually make any sense. So that was kind of why she was kind of calling out that there. But how do you reckon this one kind of worked out?
Well, it's a twofer, isn't it? And possibly even a threefer, because and there's that element where, we talk sometimes in partisan politics about the sort of singularity where you almost have to agree on every single element, otherwise you're the enemy. And we see this in some of the polarized politics. So it's that element of, I've always stood against proportional representation. I think as time has moved on, it's clear that we don't no longer have a two-party system. And I think there is that piece where, if you're going to get more people engaged, then their vote has to matter. So I'd be giving a bit of a thumbs up to the proportional representation element of this, but with the votes for 16, 17-year-olds, absolutely not. So it is that element of sometimes if you bundle together two or three different propositions into one amendment, it does make it then very difficult for people to get entirely behind it if you're asking them two or three different questions. And it feels like we had a bit of a, back to good old-fashioned politics, a bit of a left-right split on this one.
Well, there were differing views, but I don't know that they were left and right. I think they were more about the kind of the arguments of at what point are people responsible. I mean, Councillor and the speakers there that I had in the clip, opened by Councillor Hunt, Adair, then Councillor Heaney from Labour, Winnington from the Lib Dems, Candlish from the Lib Dems, Smythe from Labour, questioning about the reform amendment. Steve Pitt, obviously the council leader, Cllr Barrett from the Lib Dems, George Madgwick, the leader from Reform, and then back to Lee Hunt. So George Madgwick calling out a standing order there because Steve Pitt had said that he'd been interviewed to say that he wanted to cut wages of youngsters when he was saying that freezing them isn't cutting them. We've got a lovely comment where Tim, thank you Tim, has gone to all the trouble of listing out about 30 items and the different kind of ages at which they become available, and the most of them actually being 18. I don't know if it'll actually fit on the screen if I put it up, but you'll forgive me, Tim, for not reading them all out because we're already running behind. But how did you think that went? Do you think the amendment worked or?
Amendment fell. Labour, everybody voted for it except Reform and the Conservatives, who said no because too many things in there they didn't believe in.
Okay. You've been looking at my show notes, haven't you? So
no, I haven't. It's a guess. I'm just letting my dog in.
Okay. Well, you let the dog in. So the amendment, and again, this was this and the previous one both recorded votes. So with this one, the amendment, the reform group voted for the amendment. Voting against the amendment, 28, which was Labour and the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, and abstaining were the Lord Mayor, as is the norm, and Lee Tyndall from Pitt. So 5 for, 28 against, and 2 abstentions. So the amendment fell. So the unamended motion then passed with 24 for, 8 against, and 2 abstentions. So the abstentions again being the Lord Mayor and Councillor Tyndall. The against being Reform and also I believe Councillor Gardner and Councillor I beg your pardon, and the Reform and the Conservative councillors. And the 4 was was Labour and the Lib Dems.
Yeah, so
I mean, as you spoke to a kind of left-right split. Do we want to skip past Healthwatch, or do we mention it in passing, or do you want me to play the clip on that one?
Yeah, I mean, Healthwatch. It's another. This one again is a slightly unfortunate one in that the government has decided that Healthwatch doesn't add value, so has kind of scrapped it. I think Healthwatch in Portsmouth is reasonably well respected. So it's very similar to the news this week about police and crime commissioners. If you've got a good one, then you're disappointed they're going. If you've got a lame one, then you're probably not too bothered. But I think as the government has made the decision on Healthwatch, let's skip over it because it is gone.
Okay, that one passed unanimously anyway.
Yeah.
But I'll share online the clips, and that you can go onto our website and find the links to each of the debates on each of the items if you just click into the section where it says notices of motion. So 11D digital IDs. So from Cllr Barrett and Steve Pitt, basically questioning, raising concerns about the Labour government's plans to bring in digital IDs. So remember, this was also one of the ones that the public deputation talked about. Let's play the clip.
Many people that have contacted me are worried, upset, and some are just really outraged when they saw the topic of digital ID raising its ugly head again. They're worried about their right to privacy, the government having more control over their lives, public trust in how that data is used once it's gained, being in trouble if they did not get digital ID, the huge costs this will incur, and why money is being spent on this when there are other more important things that the public perceive need more funding. I think it's extremely important to say that concern has been raised not just by people across the political spectrum, but also by charities such as Amnesty UK, Age UK and Crisis, that a digital ID system could deepen digital exclusion and also affect society's most marginalised, such as older people, people living in poverty, and disabled people who often have limited access to digital devices or have a low digital literacy.
A recent report from the Good Things Foundation shows that 1.6 million adults in the UK do not have access to a smartphone, tablet or laptop. Another recent study found that 4% of adults, around 2.1 million people, are completely offline, and 16% lack even basic digital skills. These figures are not abstract, they represent real people, many of whom are on low incomes or facing other vulnerabilities. If digital ID becomes mandatory for proving the right to work, it will create serious barriers to employment for those who most need the system to be simple and accessible. People without devices and the millions lacking digital skills will be locked out of work opportunities. Second, I feel this is looking to address a problem which doesn't actually exist. Employers are already legally required to check right-to-work documentation before hiring. The government has admitted that digital ID could be extended in future to cover areas like welfare, banking and tax. This is the thin end of a very dangerous wedge. Privacy is not just about hiding wrongdoing, it protects dignity, prevents wrongful suspicion and safeguards the freedom to dissent and debate.
This is all about Labour government wanting to control everybody's lives from every aspect. We've had a lot of high-profile hacks this year. I think Jaguar Land Rover, I think Marks and Spencer's lost 98% of their revenue from the first quarter of what actually happened. And let's face it, when it comes to security in the government protecting our data, and we could talk about all governments in here, the record is pretty lamentable. Am I going to be asking my 90-year-old father to have a digital ID, Councillor Heaney? No, because it's going to be mandatory. He is perfectly happy with everything that's going on in his life at this precise moment in time, but we're going to foist something on him. The second one I will give, and everybody in this chamber, even Councillor Standen, will know who I'm talking about, in Honorary Alderman Freeman Frank Jonas. Frank's idea of digital is a typed letter just strapped to a pigeon, for crying out loud, and we all know what Frank was actually like. I mean, crying out loud, the man's mobile phone was made by JCB.
There are some inaccuracies in this motion very clearly, and there's also a good deal of hysteria going on here as well. The inaccuracy is that the government has decided to require everyone in the UK to have mandated digital IDs. No, they have not. Pensioners don't have to have them. The only requirement they're looking for is for work. The sort of hysteria that seems around that if the government has a database, you've got a problem. I have a national insurance number. They know my NHS number. When I get a letter from the NHS, I have my NHS number on there. So they've got my number and my details there. And I pay tax, so I have a tax number. And the tax office have my details. So there are lots of databases which the government have, which they can identify me and they can write to me and I can write to them. So the very existence of government databases is not a sign of a totalitarian state. And I was really quite surprised at how many countries are now actually involved in either developing pilot schemes or already have them. Estonia has had a digitalised scheme for 20 years. I didn't know that. The European Union is developing pilot projects across the countries to further integrate some of the digital ID systems they have. And I am not of the view that this is the end of the world. I mean, I think this motion is rather hysterical, quite frankly. I reserve my position on how they're going to implement this, because obviously I haven't seen the detail, and we certainly don't know the full detail.
I want to tell you two different stories. One is my niece who got married to a Frenchman in France, and it was discovered that two of the essential documents she needed to get French citizenship were at variance. I think it was passport, and which had a different name on than her birth certificate. My neighbour, who I'm taking care of at the moment because he's of his increasing age and infirmity, doesn't have a passport. Nobody has to have a passport. They don't have to go travelling. He doesn't have a driving licence. It's been many years since he drove. You don't have to have a driving licence. I'd reserve the right to look at the details when they come.
And so, quite frankly, what happens in other countries is irrelevant. This is about the way we interact with the state, the way the state interacts with us, and the way we do things. The government does not own your identity. Any ID card will do that. It will take your identity from being you. You will know who you are, I think, I hope. Everyone in this room knows who they are, and they know that ultimately that's all that matters. We've already had the interference of our democracy by insisting that you go to vote, you have to have ID. Outrageous.
I'm a little bit lost, I must admit, on the idea that when you've got digital ID, it changes who you fundamentally are.
Well, this one's a funny one, isn't it? Because this is, and I can't remember which councillor it was, but the person who said this appears to be trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist seemed to be striking the nail very firmly on the head. Because this one came out and got a lot of noise from the libertarians, and I did love the fact that it was debated very widely on Facebook. It's like, I've got no right to own my data I'm going to say that out loud on the biggest data harvesting platform on the universe. And you just kind of furrow your brow and shake your head. So this is one of those ones where the subject itself, digital ID, I don't think I've come across anybody, even the most fervent, and Councillor Heaney there tried hard, but he still couldn't articulate, so why are we doing this exactly?
Yeah, and to answer your question of who it was, so the speakers there were Lib Dem Kimberly Barrett, Lib Dem Stuart Brown, who was the one that was saying basically what problem does this solve, Conservative Simon Bosher, Labour Graham Heaney, Labour Judith Smythe, and Lib Dem Matthew Winnington. So who
was that at the end there? Was that Matt?
Yeah, Matthew Winnington, yeah. From the Lib Dems. Oh. So, yeah, and forgive me, it's kind of one of the bits that I'd had to try and in a desperate attempt to try to make the clips at least kind of remotely to fit in the length of the show. Councillor Brown did kind of point out, well, hang on, look, if you're employing someone, you're already required to check that they have a right to work. So essentially kind of what is this doing that you can't, that isn't done with the existing thing? On the converse argument, you could say probably Tesco knows more about me than the government has. Yes. And isn't it convenient that if you actually need to access your government information, you have one way of doing that? But of course, governments are really, really crap at implementing IT systems and have a bit of a notorious record when it comes to keeping that information safe.
Yeah. So I think in the interest of time, everyone agrees violently that no one can see the reason why. This does not seem like a good idea. Nobody wants it. ... But why the bloody hell are we wasting time in Portsmouth on something we can have no influence over? Hopefully everybody voted in favour of it as a nice big flag-waving, grandstanding, pointless activity, and we can move on.
Are you accusing councillors of virtue signalling?
I am doing exactly that, but they're all doing it.
We're all doing it together. Okay.
Come on.
Yes, indeed. It was carried without it being a recorded vote. So obviously not something that people are... I think the recorded ones are definitely things that people are going to be putting onto leaflets, aren't they? 11E scrubbed to put that onto the agenda for the next time because the proposer for that was Councillor Charlotte Gerarda, and she wasn't able to be in the chamber on Tuesday. So 11F was the fair and transparent allocation of asylum dispersal, protecting Portsmouth housing and public services, which is a bit of a mouthful.
Oh, this feels like another Lib Dem. Oh no, this would be reform then, would it?
So this is proposed by Joe Standen and seconded by George Madgwick. So it's a reform motion. And let's have the clip on this one.
Let's hear from Joe.
So over the summer, it was revealed that Portsmouth was at the heart of a national news story that revealed HMOs were being used by Home Office contractors for asylum seekers without the knowledge of this council. Recent figures show that around 700 asylum seekers are living in Portsmouth, with some at the Royal Beach Hotel and others spread around in 55 HMOs, which staggeringly is more than the entire rest of the Hampshire Authority combined in our one city. So for anyone to say that this is not a major factor towards housing issues in our city is wholly wrong. This is grossly disproportionate. The Labour government has also recently announced a plan to move asylum seekers out of hotels. This is causing great concern amongst residents, and they are worried that they will be placed directly within the tight-knit communities such as Paulsgrove or Portsmouth as a whole.
Reform does not say in the motion that that is out of 3,318 HMOs in the city, or just under 1.6%. The 700 figure is also 0.3% of our city's population. Now again, some people will say that's a lot of people, but it pales to the near 13,000 people who came here from other parts of the UK last year, or the 29,000 students this city has. That's the legal migration reform in the motion says is good. They're not the problem, it seems. It's the 700 that are the problem. Regarding landlords kicking people out to accommodate asylum seekers, that may be true. Elsewhere in the country, the article in the motion refers to a British thing, doesn't mention Portsmouth once. And I'm told this council doesn't know any such cases here. Indeed, as the eloquent deputation earlier said, it's landlords rejecting people with benefits that's actually more of a burden on people getting social homes. Now, regardless of this, the motion is right. Councillor Standen is correct. We do have a disproportionate number of asylum seekers. That's a point the council, including me, have been telling the Home Office for years. In 2018, you, Lord Mayor, raised concerns about the number of children seeking asylum coming to Portsmouth. In 2022, the council said the city was at capacity when there was an inquiry about using a student hall. The following year, the Home Office did not take a site in this city forwards after we repeated that and told them no. It's why, when this government asked if we wanted extra asylum accommodation earlier this year, this council said government made it clear then that they got the message, and I'm delighted it's finally made that explicit and put the cap I outlined. That's why in March last year, this council, including councils now in reform, backed the concept of a council of sanctuary. Indeed, no one spoke or voted against it. Watch the webcast if you think I'm wrong. It only lasts 10 minutes. That's not to say that those who abuse the system should be let off. In my view, any asylum seeker convicted of a criminal offence should be deported immediately. Those who traffic people in small boats should be punished too. They exploit the fact that there's no safe and legal routes for asylum in this country. They make money out of people's hopes, and damn the consequences. Using hotels as asylum accommodation is also wrong. It doesn't work for the asylum seeker. It doesn't work for the local community. You have the situation where I think it was the Bibby Stockwell barge in Dorset, whereby people who opposed asylum seekers and people who supported asylum seekers both actually turned around to the local media and said, well, we don't want this barge here. However, there are so many inaccuracies in this motion, or saying things that we're doing already, that amending it to reflect the truth negates it, and under our rules law, Mayor, we can't do that. So we're going to vote against this motion on the grounds that it's either factually wrong or it's happened already.
So Joe Standen opening up, and I think that was Councillor Darren Sanders robustly replying.
It was indeed. In the interest of time, I kind of trimmed down quite heavily the debate there, but that was the kind of the crux of the matter was that issue. There was some kind of interplay between Councillor Madgwick and Councillor Sanders about what were the right figures, because they seem to be kind of getting different things from being told different things from different places. But essentially, yeah, the administration made their point of, look, we're not going to vote for this because either a load of this is not right or we're already doing it. So there's no point in us voting for it.
Yeah, and and it's a difficult one because look, it is reform's number one hot topic at the moment. So obviously, it would be very odd if reform hadn't brought a motion at some point about asylum seekers in Portsmouth, there being too many of them, and the city not being able to cope. It has been one of their key strategies. They've been very vocal about it, and let's be honest, it's an issue that has gained national traction. When you see the Labour Home Office, the Home Secretary this morning doing the political rounds, waving their fist metaphorically and saying they're going to be cracking down on asylum seekers, and it will be longer before people can, claim permanent residency and all of those things. It's the topic of the moment, isn't it?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it is the topic of the moment. I mean, you can't kind of conclude that without obviously certain parties have made it the topic of the moment, and it's to some degree a bit of a toxic thing to try and have a sensible conversation about. So at least the council managed to have that debate without it kind of descending into a pointy fingers and point scoring. But there was a kind of a rational debate there about actually, look, this is actually what's happening in Portsmouth. It would have been a surprise had it not. But obviously, that's Councillor Joe Standen, the victor of the Paulsgrove by-election. That was his first motion to into the council chamber, and his first speech in the chamber. So I'm sure we'll see many more motions from him in the future. There wasn't a recorded vote on this, and the motion fell.
Yeah, and I think it was always going to, and again, we can't talk to what those numbers are or the facts because we don't know them. There was clearly a belief from Darren that they were perhaps not accurate, and I think that is I think the council need to be commended for having that discussion because it is in the public domain in a respectful way, but ultimately, unless you can quantify the problem accurately and get numbers everybody agrees on and agree on what those actions are, it didn't feel like that one was ever going to get universal support, and I'm not surprised.
No, indeed. 11G, I don't have a clip for, but it was the motion from George Fielding and Yinka Adeniran from Labour, essentially. With regard to supporting the Valor network for the urgent restoration and reuse of military housing in Portsmouth, essentially calling out that there's a too large proportion of MOD housing stock that's uninhabitable, and the MOD don't really kind of seem to be doing a huge amount to kind of get to that rapidly, and this is about getting on board with a government scheme to essentially kind of tackle that. But also, interestingly, another thing that came out of it was that it will also kind of look at tackling, including kind of review of homelessness. But again, Darren Sanders pointed out there that actually the council had already previously been engaging on basically the early kind of things to this. And the Lib Dems put in a motion that basically just called for the wording to be changed to include working with partners basically across Hampshire, because Portsmouth already works with partners across Hampshire on this subject. So it made sense to be involving them rather kind of acting unilaterally. Unsurprisingly, this passes unanimously, although the Lord Mayor doesn't actually declare it. So I don't know whether that makes a difference. But he talks about is there anybody against, and that because there aren't, and there wasn't a recorded vote, but doesn't make the declaration that normally takes place at the end of a motion of actually what the result is. But it's quite clear that it's kind of passed unanimously. And on another thing, I forgot to mention earlier on, unless my numbers are completely wrong, the amendment in 11B, by the way, from Reform that the declaration was that 28 councillors voted against. I only actually counted 27. And I've listened to it about 5 times. So
yeah. Now you are in the weeds. In the interest of time, get out of the weeds.
Let's get out of the weeds. So so that one passed. So that was the notices of motion. There was, I don't know if you recall, actually the last full council meeting, the Lord Mayor, Councillor General Vern Jackson, made an intervention at the end of the debate. He did a similar thing today, where he talked about previously where the council had been trying to liaise with the MOD to contact service personnel that were about to leave the service and re-enter civilian life and talk to them about potential employment in the council, but the MOD had turned them down. So GVJ then essentially kind of saying that sometimes perhaps actually the MOD itself can be a bit of a blocker to those things. And then we went on to members' questions, where there was a little bit of a scrabble, because normally there's basically a set amount of time that the questions have to be answered in, and if they're not, basically they just get a written response instead of being debated. But Councillor Heaney tried to suggest that they suspended that standing order in order to extend the time, because they didn't have basically the full council meeting. Sorry, it was cancelled last time because of the Paulsgrove by-election, and the Lord Mayor basically said, I don't think we need to do that. Let's see how we go. And Councillor Bosher tried to say, well, surely we should decide that at the beginning rather than just kind of get halfway through it and decide that we need more time. But as it was, they went on with the regular 40 minutes and kind of got through things. But there was one question that I did kind of want to call out. There was a couple of things that were mentioned there, but the one that George Madgwick had put, which was essentially asking the council leader, Steve Pitt, are Portsmouth City Council, are they essentially kind of in favour or doing anything to stop the idea or the rumours that that the 2026 local elections will be postponed or cancelled? And I've got the reply from Steve, because it pretty much kind of rounds everything off for us.
But I do think it's also important, because I see stuff on social media where people are saying that it's undemocratic because our elections were postponed this year and they live in Portsmouth. That is not true. No local elections have been postponed in the city of Portsmouth. We elect, as you all know, in thirds, and this was our fallow year with no elections. So we have not postponed elections in Portsmouth. We will not be asking to postpone elections in Portsmouth. And if the government suggested that we should postpone elections in Portsmouth, we will say no.
Pretty definitive.
Yeah, basically we don't want any part of that. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I would say there is that I think, they didn't postpone elections in Portsmouth last year, but they did postpone them in Hampshire. And I think the majority of Hampshire was against that, but the government postponed them anyway. So I think whilst it's good to see that, both Steve and George are aligned that we should not be postponing them in May 26, I guess the way that this one is rolling out, that if they decide they are going to postpone them, then postponed they will be.
Yeah, I don't know that Rebel Portsmouth will be able to hold an election without. For the government to do that, they'd have to. I think they'd have to change legislation, because they. I don't know kind of the intricacies of it, but there's all sorts of things that they've kind of have to do. But it has been a bit weird that they've refused to confirm that they're not going to delay them.
Yeah, well, it is one of the ways. Obviously, Labour not exactly surfing the crest of a wave in the polls at the moment, are they? So, so cynical in one so young. So a packed agenda. We've got through it. We've gone the full hour. So before you start diving into intricacies of detail of process, we'll invite our listeners. We'll thank them for listening to the Pompey Politics podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sansbury. Please do remember to like, share, comment, subscribe to us on YouTube if that's where you're catching us. Give us a follow if you're listening to the podcast wherever, whatever audio platform you're listening to the podcast on. Please, by all means, leave us a review. We'd love to see that. We're going to be doing something extra special the week after next, so we're going to take a bit of a miss on next week's show, but you'll have seen that we're involved in the publicly streamed meeting for on behalf of Let's Stop Ackwind. So we'll be doing that on the 26th, and then the Sunday after that we'll be talking about the budget. So that's bound to have fun, isn't it?
That is going to be a roller coaster of a ride. So many things have been in and out so far. Who knows?
Who knows? At this point, I think a magic 8 ball could probably be used to write the speech. So, but we shall see. But if you've subscribed to us on YouTube, if you've followed us on Facebook, and make sure you're clicking for notifications, or indeed if you sign up for our emails, you can scan the QR code in the top right hand corner. Then we'll keep you posted about what we're up to. And again, if you wanted any more of the details about the full council meeting, all of those links are there, so please do go look at them, so that then I'm not the only person that sat and watched it twice. See you next time. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.